Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video we're going to focus on what I'm going to coin a phrase of the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad, I'm not referring to African American peoples who were emancipated through a secret clandestine operation to move them from the Confederate States up north, perhaps into Canada, to escape slavery. I'm not referring to the Underground Railroad in that context. I'm referring to an Underground Railroad that leads from Brooklyn, the Bronx, New Rochelle, New York, Mount Vernon, New York, Greater Manhattan, New York City, and repositioning them, number one, to Hollywood, what became Hollywood, which is Burbank, the city of Burbank, the city of Beverly Hills, the city of Hollywood, West Hollywood, Van Nuys, Canoga Park, the center for porn, which later became West Hills, Hidden Hills, Calabasas, Woodland Hills. Don't be confused, people. They changed the names to keep everyone confused. And as always, my video will always be focused on correlation and causation. And does correlation equal causation? But always with the experience that money laundering specifically means the concealment of the sources and uses of money. That's the definition of money laundering. Typically, it's illegal uses of money. Typically. Doesn't have to be. Just be unethical. You could have unethical uses of money. It's not really illegal, but it's not particularly friendly. What I will tell you is that you have the same thing going on with the Underground Railroad, repositioning Jewish people from the greater New York City area, metro area, out to Hollywood, out to Stanford University and Sand Hill Road, specifically 2800 Sand Hill Road and 2500 Sand Hill Road. It conceals the relationships of the people that set up these clandestine service private banking venture capital facilities. They go by a number of names: private equity, private banking. Anything to do with the word private is going to mean clandestine secrecy. Okay? And does that mean it's illegal? No, it doesn't mean it's illegal. It means it probably is illegal. It probably is illegal. And the fact that it's not disclosed is incriminating, in my opinion. Also, we have the city by the bay, San Francisco, and there again, the Underground Railroad has a station in San Francisco. So we're talking about Jewish people being repositioned from Brooklyn, from greater New York City metro areas to San Francisco, to Menlo Park, Atherton, Palo Alto, Stanford University, Sand Hill Road, and to Hollywood, which I'm calling West Hollywood, City of Burbank, Universal City, Studio City, Van Nuys, Chatworth, Canoga Park, head of porn, and I'm talking about Beverly Hills, 90210. That's what I'm talking about. All right, let's get started. So that's my 3-minute introduction. So to answer the question, does correlation equal causation? Well, with respect to who runs Hollywood, the answer is an emphatic yes, it does. Okay, because the Jews run Hollywood. 100%. Not 99%. Not 96.2%, 100% with an exclamation mark. Remember, it's the bankers are at the top, and then you have the management supervision level, which is the people I'm going to talk about, or the Jewish people who run Hollywood, are in level 2. However, they all have extremely friendly banking relationships, probably out of Manhattan, New York, because that's always been known as the center of banking for the so-called United States of America. I understand they have satellite offices at Sand Hill Road and in San Francisco and in Los Angeles, but those are sort of satellites, and the big shots control everything out of Manhattan, which in turn have to report to London and Bern, Switzerland, and Zurich, Switzerland, and Geneva, Switzerland, where the WHO is. The World Health Organization, that's a bank too. Part of the United Fraudulent Nations that are not united. World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum is out of Davos, Switzerland. So something to do with Switzerland and London and Manhattan, and then out to Sand Hill Road near Stanford University. That's kind of the dysfunction that is known as private banking. But I'm going to start out first with Hollywood. Like, where did it come from? From under a rock? No, it probably came from Europe originally, in particular France, and then it morphed over to Fort Lee, New Jersey, and parts of New York. And the first studios that were of note that were established in the Hollywood area was Universal Studios, formed in 1912. However, there was precursors to that back in New Jersey and New York. American Eclair was founded in New Jersey in 1907. That was really a satellite office from France, and it morphed into Motion Pictures and Motion Pictures Trust, which was the concept that anyone who created a film was deserving of royalties from theaters, and that was the Nickelodeons. There used to be theater chains. That was the technology of the time to deliver social engineering content. We had radio and we had film. We didn't have television. We didn't have smartphones. We didn't have 5G towers. We didn't have communication satellites. We had Nickelodeon theaters. That means for one nickel, you could watch a series of films, or you could play a jukebox on a nickel. So a Nickelodeon refers to either a theater where you can see a motion picture, or you can play music from a jukebox. That too can be a Nickelodeon concept. One nickel plays the content, the social engineered content. Keywords, social engineered music, social engineer film, motion picture. All right, well anyway, Universal Studios was born from a marriage of America Eclair and Moving Pictures and some Jewish people who owned those franchises. I will give you names in a moment. That's 1912. Then in 1923, Warner Brothers was created, 1923. Now, again in New York with a Jewish family. Harry Warner, Jack Warner, Samuel Warner, Albert Warner, all Jewish men, and their name really wasn't Warner, it was Wonsal, which is very Yiddish. So their families decided to change the name from Wonsal, spelled W-O-N-S-A-L, and switched it to Warner, which sounded less Yiddish. So that's the first example that I have of Jewish people changing their last name to not sound Jewish. And that would be Warner Brothers Studios. Again, formed in 1923 in Burbank, California. That's this place where Lockheed Skunk Works was eventually established in the 1930s at the Burbank Hollywood Airport. And that is where Warner Brothers Studios set up shop in 1923. Harry Warner in charge. He's the eldest brother. Jack Warner is the youngest brother. You may have heard of Jack Warner. It's not that different than Roy and Walt Disney. Everybody's heard of Walt Disney, and they think he ran Disney Studios. Not true. It was Roy O. Disney, not to be confused with his son, Roy Disney Jr. Roy O. Disney is 9 years older than Walt Disney. As far as I can tell, the Disneys were not Jewish. However, they received funding money from Harry Warner, who's Jewish, at Warner Brothers. So there wouldn't be a Disney Studios without the Jewish Warner Brothers, because they funded Walt and Roy Disney and their uncle, Robert, who also threw $500 of equity funding, private equity funding, in the form of a loan. I guess he wanted his money back. All right, so, and they all lived over in Lena LaBianca's neighborhood in Silver Lake, called the Disney Brothers Studios in 1926. Anyway, what you should know is that Warner Brothers was founded shortly after the Universal Studios were. Universal Studios, 1912, Warner Brothers with the four Jewish brothers, 1923. And then later that same year, Roy and Walt Disney's company was founded, through a loan that was laundered, concealed private equity from Harry Warner, giving and providing money to his secretary, whose name is Margaret J. Winkler. Margaret J. Winkler. She was a silent film star, and she's working for the Warner Brothers in Burbank, California. And so they encouraged her to start a company instead of making it look like Warner Brothers created Disney. So somehow some money was given to Margaret Winkler, who established a company called Winkler Pictures. And let me make sure I got that right. This money laundering business is designed on purpose to get you confused, so you'll give up on the research. You'll give up because they do that on purpose. Winkler Pictures was founded by a series of people, one of whom was the secretary to Harry Warner, and her name is Margaret Winkler. However, there's two other Jewish people that are in the frame, pardon the pun, in the frame as well, named Fleischer. Two brothers, the Fleischer brothers from New York, Jewish boys from New York. And they join with Margaret Winkler. And they provide the funding for Roy and Walt Disney to create the Disney Brothers Studios, which is quickly changed to Disney Studios. And then in the years later, it's called the Walt Disney Company, the Walt Disney Studios. There's a whole host of names that the Disney Brothers, Walt Disney Pictures, Disney Brothers Studios, Walt Disney Company, but it all emanated from Margaret J. Winkler Productions, which has two Jewish brothers as partners, the Fleischers. And I have their names here somewhere, and of course I can't find it. Those two brothers. Oh, here it is. Here it is. Okay. To be thorough. The brothers that I'm talking about are Maximilian and David Fleischer. They had a company called Fleischer Studios, and they approached Harry Warner of Warner Brothers, of the four Jewish Warner Brothers, and he put Max and David Fleischer together with his secretary, M.J. Winkler Productions, a.k.a. Margaret Winkler. So now you got Margaret Winkler and Max and David Fleischer, and they give some love to Roy Disney and Walt Disney so they can proceed to the next step and set up shop on North Hyperion Boulevard in Silver Lake District. They're not ready to move over to Hollywood Burbank Airport yet because this is in the 1920. This is 1923. This all happens in 1923. So what happens next? The next year in 1924, Columbia Pictures, which is given love from Columbia Broadcasting Systems, the Masonic Eye, CBS, they create Columbia Pictures in 1924. Simultaneously with that, MGM Studios is created, which is Metro Goldwyn Mayer. They're created also in 1924 at the same exact time that Columbia Pictures of Columbia Broadcasting is created. What can I tell you about MGM? I can tell you a lot about MGM. Stands for Marcus Loews, who had a chain of theaters throughout the United States. Remember, that's the technology to deliver the film. So he partnered with the creations of content, because you need two things, right? Like to do this channel and communicate with you, I need a camera, I need a computer, I need lighting, I need a script. I need a script like scriptures. I need some kind of a script. I need a written text. I need to be able to recite my facts and figures. And of course, I need an audience. So back in 1926, that would be maybe a community theater or playhouse, performing arts theater, where I could stand up and hopefully the crowd would stay and listen to me. So today I'm using the internet to communicate with you. But back then, in the 1920s, they used theaters and radio. So Metro Pictures was created, Metro Goldwyn Pictures. Then Louis B. Mayer was a partner. He had a company of his own, Louis B. Mayer Pictures, and he entered into a partnership with the Samuel Goldwyn and Edward Selwyn and Archibald Selwyn. So we have Archibald Selwyn, who's Jewish, Edgar Selwyn, who's Jewish, Samuel Goldwyn, who's Jewish, Louis B. Mayer, who's Jewish, spelled M-A-Y-E-R. And we have the owner of the theater chain, Marcus Loews, he's Jewish. So how many Jews have I got in this story? I got Marcus Loews, I got Louis B. Mayer, I got Samuel Goldwyn, I've got Edward Selwyn, and I got Archibald Selwyn. So there's 5 Jewish people who founded MGM. So when I say Metro Goldwyn Mayer Studios was Jewish, I'm not kidding. That's 5 Jewish partners. And they had banking help, of course, who I don't know who that is. Today, MGM is owned by Amazon through its ownership of the MGM Holdings, which also owns Sony. So you've got Sony and the MGM Holdings, which also includes MGM Resorts, which owns the Mandalay Bay Hotel where the Stephen Paddock Las Vegas shooting that never happened there in the room. That's brought to you by Amazon. Amazon didn't own the company then. Amazon entered into a purchase agreement of MGM Metro Goldwyn Mayer Studios in May 2001. They closed the deal in March 2022. So in fairness to Amazon, which is a clandestine service company that was created by some Jewish bankers I'm going to tell you about earlier on Sand Hill Road in Menlo Park near Stanford University. Amazon was created by a CIA private bank. And they now own MGM Holdings, which owns Metro Goldwyn Mayer Studios, MGM Resorts, United Artists. They own the James Bond 007 franchise, the Rocky Picture franchises, and they own a whole host of other things, including the expired contract on Sharon Tate, who had a 7-year contract that was coming up for a renewal, and Sharon Tate was not renewing. Her contract was going to be, it was essentially expired at the date of her death, even though it didn't expire till December 31st, 1969. If you don't sign those things, they can't book you for work. So she should have had that all buttoned up by January 1969, and she didn't. So anyway, that's who Amazon owns. They own the legacy of Sharon Tate. They own the legacy of Metro Goldwyn Pictures and the 007 franchises. Samuel Goldwyn, Edward Selwyn, Archibald Selwyn, and Marcus Loews of the Loews theater chain. All right, so then what happens? After MGM and Columbia Pictures are both established, we move on to RKO-Radio Pictures. That's funded and founded in 1928. Now that involves Joseph Kennedy, who's he's not Jewish, but of course he had a partner, didn't he? Right, of course he did, because they're not going to let an Irish Catholic have a social engineering film creator. So it turns out that RKO Studios had a number of Jewish principals involved in that transaction. David Sarnoff partnered with Joseph Kennedy. David Sarnoff was also in charge of RCA and NBC, and he's a Russian Jewish person. So that was the adult supervision in the room was David Sarnoff, Sarnoff, David Sarnoff. He's the boss of RKO-Radio Pictures. And just so for my audience that has followed my Charlie Manson Mendacity series, that's who brought you the Sharon Tate murder scene, which is really a Hollywood set. They built 2 homes. It's actually 4 houses at 100 Cielo Drive, which is on Bella Drive. But anyway, below that home, 300 feet, at 10048 Cielo Drive, which is on Cielo Drive, they built a doppelganger twin homes, 2 homes there, 3,000 square foot home and a 1,600 square foot home and a swimming pool. Exact duplications, 98% identical to the house where Sharon Tate was murdered. They built 2 lots on a terraced hillside, needed to excavate the dirt. And that was brought to you by RKO-Radio Pictures in 1941. Property was purchased 10 days before Pearl Harbor, and it was finished in 1944 when Michelle Morgan did a photo shoot there, and they pretended that that was her love house for her new wedding. It took 4.5 years to build that property. She was only 21 years old when the property was bulldozed, and there's no way a 21-year-old woman is going to wait 4 years to have her honeymoon house built. No way. So she was the fake owner, straw owner. It was built by RKO-Radio Pictures, and then Sharon Tate and Tom Coomer were murdered on the property, along with Abigail Folger, who's a private banker. For all you bankers out there that think you're exempt, you're not. Anyway, so that's RKO Pictures, and they were brought to us in 1928. So let me just review here. I have Universal Studios, the Warner Brothers Studios, Roy and Walt Disney Studios, Columbia Pictures, MGM, and RKO-Radio Pictures. That's 6. That pretty much is 100% of Hollywood. Even though I know there's dozens of other film production companies that go by a whole host of names like Carolco Pictures, Lionsgate, TriStar Pictures, Sony Pictures Entertainment, Gentleman's Home Video, Live Entertainment, Home Video Entertainment. I mean, I can go on and on and on. Warner Brothers Records. You know, we have the music industry as part of all of this. The television industry is integrated into this. We have hedge funds that are partners in this now. But it all emanated, all 6 of those Hollywood studios were managed by Jewish founders. And the names of those founders read like a Hall of Fame of Hollywood. Patrick Powers, Bill Swanson, Mark Bauman, David Sarnoff, Carl Laemmie. He's the one that jumped on the Nickelodeon Moving Pictures Company because he didn't want to pay that franchise fee to the content providers. He wanted to create his own content so that he didn't have to pay a rental fee for other people's pictures. You should know that of all those companies I mentioned, Universal Studios, Warner Brothers, Roy and Walt Disney, Columbia Brothers, MGM, RKO-Radio Pictures, all 6 of those companies have joint operating agreements in force, meaning that they can trade and swap their talent, their actors, their singing stars can all be reassigned. That's how you can have Sharon Tate working for CBS television and also for Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer film, because they can rent her out. All the directors and the studio people can all be, it's a merry-go-round. They can all be switched out to the other companies. That's why you can be blackballed. That's for command and control. It's centralized authority. And that comes from banking, people. I can assure you that the Warner Brothers, not their real name, right? They didn't go into a room and decide all this stuff. A bank decided it. It's called centralized power and control. That's how the internet works. That's how banking works. That's how military works. They have security clearance codes. They use code names. That's why all these Jewish people, many of them, like half of them, changed their name so that it doesn't sound so Jewish. Half the Jewish people leave their names the same, and half of them change. So it gives you a false impression of who's running Hollywood. Richard Levinson, William Link, they created Columbo and Murder, She Wrote. They're both Jewish people from Philadelphia, but got into the business in New York City. Okay? Sidney Aaron Patty Tchaikovsky wrote the screenplay for Network, and he was born in the Bronx, New York. And we have Peter Falk, who's the star of the television hit series Columbo, and he's Jewish, and he's from New York City. And there he is. And of course, he went to the actor studio. Peter Falk had a lot of intelligence indoctrination. I won't get into it right now. His university training, he was in the Merchant Marines, but he went to the CI spook indoctrination schools, which gave him his diplomas. And again, he's part of a Jewish-produced television stars created by Richard Levinson and William Link, both Jewish guys from New York. And the star of the show is Peter Falk, a Jewish guy from New York, who was born in the Bronx but moved up to Ossining, New York, which is about 20 miles north above Yonkers. But he was born in the Bronx. You'll see that many of my banking cohorts that are Jewish come from the Bronx also. All right, so I guess that's enough on Hollywood. I hope I've proven my point, is that the top 6 film creation companies were all founded by Jewish people from the greater New York City area, some of whom had come from Poland or parts of Austria, which got renamed Poland, or Russia, and they ended up in New York City, and then they ended up in Hollywood. All right, let me set that aside and turn my attention to private banking in California. California is the place you want to be, so they loaded up the trucks and they moved to Atherton. Okay, 1972, we had Kleiner, Perkins, Caulfield, and Byers, a.k.a. also known as acronym Clandestine Service KPCB. Perhaps you've heard of Kleiner Perkins. It's Eugene Kleiner. He was born in Europe. He's Jewish. He's Polish Jewish. Eugene Kleiner. And he escaped the Nazis in 1938, got to New York City, and then he found his way out to join a partnership with Tom Perkins, who I think is Jewish. He certainly makes lots of Semite comments. And we have Frank Caulfield and Brooke Byers. Anyway, those four partner up and open up an office at 2800 Sand Hill Road in Menlo Park, next to Stanford University. At the exact same time, Sequoia Capital is founded with Don Valentine in 1972 as well. So we have Kleiner Perkins, which is Jewish, and Sequoia Capital, which Don Valentine was born and raised in the Bronx, and he went to Fordham University. I can't tell if he's Jewish or not. He certainly is well cloaked. I have no information on his parents, so that's why I can't tell if he's Jewish or not. He's joined by Doug Leone from Mount Vernon, New York, which is about 8 miles north of the Bronx, and there he is. The firm is founded in 1972. Doug Leone joins, in the 1980s, after some time, and there they are on Sand Hill Road, and they're joined by Jerome Kohlberg, who's a Jewish person from New Rochelle, New York, in 1976, and his partners are, of course, Henry Kravis and George Roberts, who also are Jewish, but they're from Oklahoma and Texas, and they're younger, and they all joined forces with Jerome Kohlberg at Bear Stearns in New York. And then that's what put those 3 Jewish guys together, Jerome Kohlberg being the eldest, Henry Kravis, and George Roberts. And of course, they had a film made for them regarding the Barbarians at the Gate, which I think Tommy Lee Curtis was in a starring role that played Henry Kravis, a real bloodthirsty, cold-blooded financial terrorist. You should know that Tommy Lee Jones was roommates with Al Gore, the fake vice president of the United States under Bill Clinton. They were Harvard University roommates. All right, anyway, I find this more than disturbing that in 1972 we get Kleiner Perkins, a Jewish-founded clandestine service banking firm, which brags about creating Genentech, which is DNA technology, and they're so arrogant that the headquarters is actually on DNA Avenue in South San Francisco. I mean, you're really pushing the envelope with the clandestine services when you call your headquarters street the name after what you're doing with humans, which is monkeying with their DNA, which is immoral, unethical, and should be illegal. That's Kleiner Perkins, Caulfield, and Byers. Sequoia Capital brought you FTX, but before that they brought you Cisco Systems, and they brought you LSI Logic, and you should know that on the brochures for Kleiner Perkins and Sequoia Capital and Jerome Kohlberg's KKR, they have the same companies that they bring to life. They like to say that Eugene Kleiner is the genius for venture capitalists, but they call Don Valentine the godfather of Silicon Valley. And I don't know how you can be the godfather of Silicon Valley and give up the rights to private equity to Eugene Kleiner. They give the same, it's like the Academy Awards. They give Kleiner Perkins, Sequoia Capital, and Jerome Kohlberg's KKR. They give them the same accolades, but they're all have joint operation agreements. In other words, Kleiner Perkins, Sequoia Capital, and KKR, they participate in many of the same clandestine military financing deals and operations. They all have the same COVID policies. They all have the same face diaper masking policies. So what I'm telling you is there is not 1 millimeter worth of difference between Kleiner Perkins, Sequoia Capital, and KKR. They're the same thing. They're the same thing. There's only one bank for the whole world. But they set up competitive agency shops to create the illusion that there's some kind of competitive bidding going on here. There isn't. There isn't. Then I'm going to turn my attention to my last point here, San Francisco, city by the bay. And in 1965, Barbara Boxer rolls into town. In 1965, that's when Wolf Grajonka from New York City rolls into town. His name, you think, is Bill Graham. They even named the San Francisco Civic Auditorium after him. It's called the Bill Graham Civic Auditorium, but his name is Wolf Grajonka. Bill Graham's name came out of a phone book in New York. They got it out of a phone book. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, here's a good one, Bill Graham. Barbara Boxer, that's not her real name. She's a Jewish girl from Brooklyn, New York. She was born Barbara Sue Levy. Barbara Sue Levy, and her mother's name was Silvershine. Not to be confused with Oliver Stone's Silverstein. Oliver Stone's last name is Silverstein. Barbara Sue Levy, Barbara Boxer, senator from California, her mother's name was Silvershine. Barbara Sue Levy's mother's name was Silvershine. Oliver Stone's father's name was Silverstein. Wolf Grajonka became Bill Graham in San Francisco as part of the Haight-Ashbury project. Barbara Boxer, who was Barbara Sue Levy, she enters San Francisco during the Haight-Ashbury project, and she becomes a California state senator living in Green Bay, near Ross, which is where private banker Tom Wonsal lives. Tom Wonsal, that's what I said, Tom Wonsal, who brought you Nike Lance Armstrong and partnered with Nike Corporation and Phil Knight, who has an MBA from Stanford, and Tom Wonsal has a undergraduate degree from Stanford and an MBA from Harvard. And they brought you Lance Armstrong, Phil Knight, and Tom Wonsal, who lives in Green Bay, but we call it Ross. And that's where Barbara Boxer lived, in Green Bay, but we call it Ross. And Harvey Milk, he rolls into San Francisco in 1974. He's a Jewish man from where John Kennedy Airport is, Woodmere, New York, on Long Island. Harvey Milk rolls into town as part of the Haight-Ashbury project. Don't forget that Jim Jones, who I don't think's Jewish, he's from Indianapolis, Indiana, and he came to San Francisco in 1965. So Barbara Boxer appears from New York in 1965. Bill Graham appears in 1965. Jim Jones appears. And Louis Jolion West, who was born in Brooklyn, New York. And he's a CIA medical doctor, psychiatrist for MKUltra, working directly for Sidney Gottlieb, another Jewish person from the Bronx, who's a chemical engineer and in charge of MKUltra. So we got Sidney Gottlieb is associated with the Haight-Ashbury project in San Francisco, and he's from the Bronx. And we have Louis Jolion West, and he just killed an elephant in Oklahoma City at the zoo, the Lincoln Zoo, and he's in San Francisco at the same time that Barbara Boxer from Brooklyn is in San Francisco, and Bill Graham is from Manhattan, and he's in San Francisco. So that's Louis Jolion West, Barbara Boxer, Bill Graham, and Sidney Gottlieb, who are all four Jewish people from New York, and they're all in San Francisco as part of the Haight-Ashbury project. Harvey Milk follows. He follows 9 years later. All right, and the person who founded KKR, Jerome Kohlberg, he's from New Rochelle, New York. The person that founded Kleiner, Perkins, and Caulfield Buyers is from New York City. Eugene Kleiner, Jewish man from New York via Poland. And Don Valentine, who founded Sequoia Capital, he's from the Bronx and Fordham University. And Dr. Albert Laverne is from Manhattan, and he's a Jewish medical doctor psychiatrist for MK Ultra, and he practices at Bellevue State Hospital as well as Manhattan, where he has a 13-room examination office, which I don't know how he pays the rent, doing electroshock treatments, and he's a professor at Fordham University Jesuits, where he poaches his students and owns a 5,000 square foot home in Yonkers adjacent to Untermeyer Park. So again, the concentration of Jewish people in New York and the greater area is stunning. But more stunning is the Underground Railroad that transports them to Burbank, Beverly Hills, Hollywood to create social content engineering and music, and then transports them to do private secret banking in Menlo Park, Stanford University, Sand Hill Road, and also transports them to the city by the bay, San Francisco, where they can have Operation Sea Spray dumping toxic chemicals on people, Operation Midnight Climax, where they pay prostitutes to dope their clients and then videotape it. And then we have the anti-peace movement, counterintelligence, run by Timothy Leary and Sharon Tate's father, Paul Tate, with Paul Pelosi and Nancy Pelosi rolling into town at the exact time that Abigail Folger is to be terminated from her private banking duties, which will torpedo the relationship with her mother, who is in charge of the Haight-Ashbury project, Enos Mejia. All right, that's enough for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please hit the like and subscribe. Your comments are always welcome. Appreciate it very much. Thank you.